Putin's distrust of Ukraine and the EU, a historical and present-day analysis. Throughout history, wars have been engineered and prolonged by powerful elites who stand to profit from prolonged conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly expressed his distrust of Ukraine and the European Union, EU, particularly in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine. His skepticism is rooted in historical betrayals, NATO's expansionist policies, and Western economic interests. Similarly, former U.S. President Donald Trump has been critical of the EU, arguing that it is controlled by globalist elites who benefit from war and instability. This essay examines these claims with historical and present-day facts, including the role of financial powerhouses such as the Rothschild banking dynasty in global conflicts. Historical context, broken promises, and NATO expansion. Putin's distrust of Ukraine and the EU is not without reason. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Western leaders assured Russian officials that NATO would not expand eastward. Declassified documents and testimonies confirm that U.S. and European leaders made verbal commitments that NATO would not encroach upon former Soviet territories. However, these promises were broken. Since 1999, NATO has incorporated multiple former Soviet bloc countries, including Poland, the Baltic states, and, more recently, discussions about Ukraine and Georgia. Ukraine has played a pivotal role in this expansion. The 2014 Euromaidan revolution, which led to the ousting of Ukraine's pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych, was heavily influenced by Western-backed NGOs and political organizations. Leaked conversations, such as the infamous Victoria Nuland call, revealed how deeply the U.S. was involved in selecting Ukraine's new government. This event confirmed Putin's belief that Ukraine was being used as a tool by Western powers to encircle and weaken Russia. The ongoing war and the EU's role. Following Russia's military operation in Ukraine in 2022, Western nations, particularly the EU, have funneled billions of dollars in weapons and aid to Ukraine. While the media portrays this support as humanitarian assistance, in reality, it serves the geopolitical interests of NATO and Western defense contractors. The EU's recent push for a truce can be interpreted as a tactical maneuver to rearm Ukraine rather than a genuine attempt to end hostilities. Historically, ceasefires have been used to resupply and regroup, and Russia has every reason to be wary of any Western-backed agreements. Several European leaders have openly admitted that they are in this war for the long haul. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel and former French President François Hollande both acknowledged that the Minsk agreements, which were supposed to be a path toward peace, were actually used to buy time for Ukraine to strengthen its military capabilities. This aligns with Putin's view that the West is not interested in peace, but in using Ukraine as a proxy against Russia. Trump's criticism of the EU and globalist interests. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has consistently criticized the EU, labeling it as a bureaucratic entity controlled by globalists who prioritize financial gain over national sovereignty. His presidency was marked by trade wars with the EU, demands for NATO members to pay their fair share, and warnings against the bloc's reliance on Russian energy, while simultaneously antagonizing Moscow. Trump's America First approach conflicted with the globalist agenda, which thrives on perpetual conflict and economic interdependence. He was vocal about how the EU, under the influence of elites, pushed for policies that kept wars alive, benefiting arms manufacturers, financial institutions, and corporate interests rather than the people of Europe. The ongoing Ukraine war serves as an example of how the EU's political class profits from prolonged military engagement while its citizens bear the economic burden of inflation, energy shortages, and instability. The Rothschild connection, war as a business model. The Rothschild banking dynasty has long been accused of profiting from wars, dating back to the Napoleonic Wars when they financed both sides of the conflict. This strategy has been replicated throughout history, including in World War I, World War II, and the Gulf Wars. The financial elite benefits from war loans, arms sales, and post-war reconstruction projects, ensuring that regardless of the outcome, they remain in control of global economic levers. Today, major financial institutions continue to manipulate markets and influence governments to sustain conflicts. Western banks, investment firms, and defense contractors all gain from war economies, whether through weapons sales, sanctions regimes, or currency fluctuations. The war in Ukraine is no exception. Billions in military contracts have been issued, and European governments have used the crisis to justify massive public spending that benefits private financial interests. Conclusion: a justified distrust. Putin's skepticism toward Ukraine and the EU is deeply rooted in historical betrayals and the geopolitical games played by Western powers. The so-called truce being proposed by the EU is likely a strategic pause to rearm Ukraine rather than a sincere peace effort. Trump's critiques of the EU highlight how the bloc is controlled by globalist elites who profit from war and economic instability. The Rothschilds and other financial elites have historically used wars as a means to expand their wealth and influence, ensuring that conflicts remain profitable ventures. As the world watches the ongoing war in Ukraine, it is crucial to recognize the underlying financial and geopolitical motives driving Western actions. For Putin, the lesson of history is clear. Trusting the EU or Ukraine without guarantees is a dangerous gamble. Whether or not one agrees with his policies, his caution is undeniably backed by historical precedent and present realities.